and welcome to WomanVision TV. It's where women talk. I'm your host, Nadia Giordana. I have a guest coming today to talk about a very serious subject, suicide. She'll be sharing her own very personal story. Cher Lindberg is the author of Trea Ure. Let's go talk to her. Cher, welcome to the show. I'm glad you could come over today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Cher, you wrote a book titled Trea Ure, and in it you chronicle some real life events that happened to you that literally brought you to the point of contemplating suicide. So, like, without mentioning names, give us a little bit of the background and some of the events that led up to this low point.
Okay. I worked for a very large educational institution. And I worked there for 24 and a half years. I became a director in the information technology area of this organization, and I was laid off very suddenly and very unexpectedly by another woman who was younger, and I describe it in my book as she was a female bully. I describe the characteristics of that and how devastated I was after my career was taken away from me very suddenly. It took about 8 years for me to gradually spiral down into a state of depression. It was a long process. It didn't happen overnight. I actually did have other jobs after my layoff. I did get other jobs as a project manager and in the information technology area.
We go on.
We do. But I never let myself get emotionally attached to any job after that because I didn't want to go through the devastation of potentially losing another job. So I was at a point on July 15th of 2011, which is about 3 years ago, where my house was a mess. I didn't have a job. My marriage was in trouble. And I felt like I was worthless and life was hopeless. I was unlovable. And I just wanted out. I didn't want to just run away from the house, which was a mess, and I didn't want to run away from my marriage. I wanted out of this life. I had come to the end of my rope, virtually, as they say. And I came within seconds of taking everything in the medicine cabinet. I came up with a plan. The plan was I was going to take everything up there and be successful at ending my life because I had been successful in my career.
Up there, oh, up there in the cabinet.
In the medicine
cabinet.
At the house.
Okay.
My husband was gone for the weekend, and when he left, I had big plans of cleaning up the house and really making a difference in the house while he was gone. And within 3 hours after he left, I couldn't make a decision on anything to clean. I was feeling lost and helpless and overwhelmed, and I felt like I was a complete mess, and as my house was too. So I think I was overwhelmed by the clutter. I was overwhelmed by not having a job. It was a Friday afternoon. It was storming and raining outside. And I just wanted out of this life.
I must admit that I'm naive on the subject of suicide. I don't know anything about the issue. So if I ask a question that doesn't quite fit, just tell me.
Okay.
What were some of the thoughts, you've told me part of them, that went through your head that even gave you the idea that this would be a good idea to take your own life? Was it just that feeling of desperation and wanting out? Or was it even, did you give it a lot of thought? Or was it quickly that day? Was it the period building up through those 8 years? And had you ever thought about suicide ever before?
Well, I'll answer the last question first. Yes, I had thought about suicide at least a half a dozen times in the previous 8 years.
Okay.
Times I was driving down the road and I thought about turning the car quickly into a bridge.
Fantasizing what it would be
always
like.
in the back of my mind, I never wanted to hurt anybody else physically.
Okay.
But so it was always either doing something quickly and easily, feeling lost and hopeless, or jumping off a bridge. Those kinds of things. But I always became very scared whenever I got to that point, and I talked myself out of it. But on that particular day, what happened was I sat down, and after about 2 hours of trying to clean the house and not getting anywhere, not being able to make a decision on anything. And then remembering that I'd read and studied about depression, one of the signs of depression is being unable to make a decision. Just not even being able to make a decision, or if you make a decision on anything, you change your mind. So I couldn't decide, to move anything. I couldn't decide where to put anything, and I was really feeling like I was worthless. So in my mind, I sat down, I spent about 30 minutes really giving it some serious thought about ending my life. And what I realized, I went back through all of the events of my life that had led me to that point, and I continued to get more and more depressed because I was filled with regret.
Okay.
Why did I make this decision? Why did I not marry this person? Why did I not take this other job? Just a series of things in my life, flashbacks. And the more I thought about all of these things that I should have done, the more depressed I got, because I was filled with even more regret and beating myself up emotionally over things that I felt I should have done better. And that's what really brought me to the point of, okay, now I'm done. I'm done with this life. I don't want to live anymore. And when you talked about you don't have much experience with the topic of suicide, or you've never been close to that, up until my layoff, I hadn't either, but I did have some family experience with it. And that is that my grandmother, when I was 15 years old, my grandmother was in her 60s. She hung herself with a rope in the basement of their house when my grandfather went off to church.
It had to be devastating.
It was devastating because I kept thinking at 15, oh, if only I had called her more, if only I had written her more, if only I had done more, she wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. But then about 10 years later, when I was 25, my uncle, which was her oldest son, also hung himself in the garage. And he was devastated over the loss of seniority in his job. He was 52.
Sure.
So again, the same thing happened.
Same
I thought,
thing.
I'm 25 years old. Why didn't I call more? Why didn't I write more? Why didn't I make more of an effort to visit him? So the feelings of not only devastation when somebody in your family commits suicide, it's the feeling of helplessness and guilt. I wish I would have done more. That's the difference between suicide and another quick ending to a life like a car accident or a heart attack or even cancer. In those cases, yes, you're devastated when somebody you love dies, but there's not the guilt there.
Yeah.
Usually, at least in most cases.
And if there is some, it's completely different, but
Right.
it's not that personal.
The guilt with suicide, I had experienced it, and yet I was there. And people ask me, well, how could you do that to your family? How could you even think about doing that to your family when you had experienced it on the other side? And the only thing I can say is, when I didn't love myself, I felt worthless, totally unlovable on July 15th, totally overwhelmed. There's no way I could love anybody else. Even my immediate family, my daughter, my father, my brothers, my best friends.
And at that point, you didn't even feel that loved? Is that part of it?
I didn't feel anything for anybody. I didn't feel anything for myself, first of all. I didn't think I had any value to anybody, and I just wanted out. So.
Well, now obviously there was some turnaround and some healing, and I'm going to want to hear from you what that catalyst was, what happened, whether it was a big thing or a small thing. Tell us what that was. First, I want to show your book. This is Treasure Your Life by Cher Lindberg. And we'll put links and things on the screen for you.
And I want to point out this Treasure Your Life. There's a $sign here in the title. That's part of the legal title. So if you Google the words Treasure Your Life with a $sign as part of Treasure, you'll get right to my website or right to my book. And I've also got a picture on the back of me.
And I like that touch with the $sign because it says so much.
It puts a value on your life. So what happened to me was on July 15th, there was a thunderstorm, thunder and lightning all around me, and I felt like a mess. So I imagined myself doing myself in, actually taking everything in the medicine cabinet, killing myself, ending my life. And then I went into this project manager mode because I was a project manager, information technology. You have to think about all the different outcomes of
into business mode.
It's a business. So I flipped into this business mode and I went, okay, so you're successful, meaning so I'm successful. And then what? What's the first thing that's going to happen? Well, my friend who came over to help me clean, who's coming back to check on me, he's going to find me dead. And I just methodically went through all the things that were going to happen. My husband would come home after the weekend, find out his wife was dead. My daughter would probably go through therapy. My father might have a heart attack, you know, because his mother died like that, and his brother. I went through all of these things, and nothing mattered to me at that point. That's how
It just
low I
didn't
was.
faze you
Didn't
at
even
that
faze
point.
me.
Okay.
Until I got to the point of realizing that, well, when you're dead, you're either two things. You're either a bunch of dust particles, and you're nothing, or you are some other kind of spirit, let's say, or some other kind of form. And I thought, okay, so if I'm a ghost or some kind of spirit and I can watch everything, let's say I am, and I can watch everything happen around me. I imagined a funeral. I imagined people that might be sad. Just a few people. I just imagined very few people coming to my funeral because I was so down. But then I thought, what if I change my mind? What if after I'm dead, I want my life back? And I imagine having this conversation with God saying, please, God, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to hurt all these people. I didn't mean to end my life. I see a better way now. I want a do-over. And I imagined God saying, now I didn't hear a voice, but I imagined God saying, sorry, Cheryl, this isn't a movie. This isn't It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. You ended your life. You blew it. You don't get another chance. Even I, as God, cannot give you your life back. You're stuck here.
Goosebumps.
And, well, it did me too. I thought, but I want it back. And God would say, you can't have it back. You were successful at ending your life. You're stuck here now. You don't get it back. And that's when it hit me that if I didn't take anything in the medicine cabinet, not one single aspirin or anything that was up there, I wouldn't have to beg for my life back. If I didn't have to beg for my life back, I had to live in the mess and live in the marriage that wasn't working. And I really went back and forth even on that point for several minutes. And finally I decided, kind of like taking a test, which is the less of two evils. It might be just a little bit easier to try to clean up this mess in the house. And that's what I did. That's what changed my mind, was realizing that once you do this and you're successful, you don't get another chance.
You know, you have a very practical nature and analytical nature to the way you think, and that sure helped you out. Now, we hear about people going through channels, whether that's therapy, whether that's counseling, whether it's medication, and that helps for a lot of people. Did you do any of those avenues?
I did nothing.
You did nothing, so
The
it was
reason-
all out of your
Yes.
practical nature and the pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. And
Well, believe me, my family, my daughter, my husband, my father, people around me told me, you need therapy, you need antidepressants, you need to talk to a counselor. Believe me, I had been depressed for so long, I heard it over and over again, but I didn't have the money.
And at
I
that
just couldn't
point,
afford it.
did you tell them after that day that you were that close that day?
Oh,
You,
yeah.
or was it a while before you told
It
them?
took a while for me to admit it because I was
Yeah.
embarrassed. I
Oh,
was
sure.
embarrassed that I came that close, but once I realized that I didn't have to beg for my life back, I started treasuring my life, and that's when I started just noticing everything. The rain, the sunshine that came out after that rainstorm, because the sun did come out that night, and the fact that the house was getting cleaner, and the fact that I was breathing, and I was alive, it totally changed my life completely.
Well, what are some of the things you do now ongoing, and there must be, to maintain that positive outlook on life? And what are some of the things that you're doing besides your book to share your story with other people and help some other people that might be going through this?
One of the things I do is what I'm doing right now. I talk about it, and I, throughout the day, every single day, I say, you know what? I could be dead of my own choosing. If I were dead, I wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right.
You'd be talking to a ghost.
Yeah,
or talking to yourself.
You and I wouldn't have met.
We wouldn't have met at all because I met you after that.
Yeah.
And I throughout the day, I look at things and I say, if I were dead, I wouldn't be able to see this. If I were dead, I wouldn't be able to see dragonflies or waterfall or animals running across the street or people even looking at me and talking to me. I would be nothing. And I could be in a situation on the other side of this world where I would just be miserable. I would be worse off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I tell people too when I talk
Yeah,
about this.
yeah.
I have actually changed people's minds by telling them that, okay, you want to commit suicide? Because people have confided in me, you know, I'm really depressed. I say, okay, go there in your mind, do it in your mind. And then what? What's going to happen to your family? What's going to happen to your body? What's going to happen to you?
That and
as
then
a
what
person?
question?
And
Yeah.
then what? And there's people that have said, you know, I never thought about that. I never thought about what might happen to me. I said, what's going to happen to you? What if you change your mind?
Yeah.
And then they change their mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything important that, before we have to go, is there anything important I haven't asked you that you want to share?
Just that if anybody is thinking of suicide or they're depressed, to really start thinking about, would you be better off? And realize that you might be in a much, much worse situation. And also realize that people can't tell by looking at somebody else. For example, Robin Williams. Who would have thought?
I
Who would have
know.
thought somebody with
Yeah.
that talent, the money, the humor was hurting? Well, he's very similar to my uncle. My uncle, who committed suicide, was a guitar player and a singer and a jokester, and he told jokes. He was hilarious. None of us ever dreamed that he
Never
would
imagined.
ever do what his mother did. You can't tell by looking at somebody.
No,
So
you can't.
you can only tell by talking to them. So I guess I would say, if anybody is feeling down and out, there's places they can call. There's,
Do you know of any?
well, I had a number written down here. It's
Okay.
the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's 1-800-273-8255. That's one place. When there were nights that I was very, very depressed because I said suicide did not just come up one day, and I called a local crisis line. I just Googled crisis line and called that, and that would help me through it. But I think the thing to remember is you need to rely on yourself within.
Yeah.
You can reach out and talk to other people, but if for some reason whoever you reach out to doesn't give you the answers you need to reach within and pull yourself up. That's what I would say.
Well, Cher, we're out of time.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for coming on the show, sharing such a personal story.
And my website, can I tell you?
Yes.
My website is the same as my book title, except without the $, because you can't have that in the domain name. So it's www.treasureyourlife, as one word, .com.
.com.
Yes.